Chapter 6. Who gave the orders? Opening visuals. Black screen. A gunshot echoes, then fades into silence. A slow fade-in of Princip's mugshot. Hollow cheeks, haunted eyes. History records the name Gavrilo Princip as the man who killed the Archduke. But was he truly the mastermind, or merely the trigger finger in a far deeper conspiracy? Princip's arrest. Immediately after the shooting, Princip was captured, beaten, and dragged to the police station. Bloodied and dazed, he confessed to the shooting without hesitation. Yet he insisted that he was no mere tool, that he had acted for his people, for Bosnia, for Serbia. Handwritten interrogation records, archival police sketches. But police quickly learned that Princip had not been alone. He was part of a cell, a group armed, trained, and guided from across the border in Serbia. And there, the trail grew darker. The Black Hand shadow. The weapons Princip carried, his pistol, his bombs, even the cyanide capsules, had not come from Sarajevo streets. They had been supplied by the Black Hand, Serbia's most secret and feared organization. Its leader, Colonel Dragutin Dimitrijevic, nicknamed Apis, was a powerful figure inside Serbian military intelligence. To some, he was a patriot. To others, a terrorist mastermind. Portrait of Apis, stern and cold-eyed. Overlay, a shadowy Black Hand emblem. Was it Apis who gave the order to strike? Did he personally approve the assassination of Franz Ferdinand? Or did he simply provide the means and let hot-headed youths decide their own fate? Belgrade's denial. The Serbian government, when confronted, denied all involvement. Officials insisted they had no knowledge of any plot. Some ministers even warned Franz Ferdinand's entourage beforehand. Vague hints of danger that were ignored. Yet Serbia's military intelligence was riddled with factions. Was the government truly innocent or simply divided? Reenactment. Serbian officials debating in a smoky chamber. To this day, historians argue, was the plot a rogue operation of the Black Hand, beyond Belgrade's control? Or was it quietly sanctioned by those who wanted to weaken Austro-Hungary at any cost? The evidence. At trial, evidence emerged of weapons smuggled from Belgrade, of training camps across the border, of Serbian officers who had looked the other way. The assassins admitted to being armed and guided, but not ordered. Princip swore that he alone had chosen to kill the Archduke. Princip in court, his frail figure standing defiantly. Measured. But could a handful of sickly teenagers have smuggled bombs, pistols, and poison into one of Europe's most tightly controlled cities without help from powerful allies? Whispers of a larger game. Some argued that Serbia wanted war. Others claimed it was Russia, Serbia's patron, who encouraged violence to destabilize Austria-Hungary. Still others believed that Austria itself knew the danger in Sarajevo and let the plot unfold to create the perfect excuse for crushing Serbia once and for all. Maps of Europe's alliances, diplomats shaking hands under candlelight, intensifying. If true, the Archduke's death was not merely an assassination. It was a pawn's move in a far greater game of empires. The man behind the curtain? Dragutin Dimitrijevic, Apis, would later boast of plots and murders, yet even he denied direct involvement in Sarajevo. He claimed the young men acted on their own, though he admitted his agents supplied them weapons. Truth or cover-up? To this day, the answer remains uncertain. A hand placing a pistol on a table, fading into black. Grave. And so the question lingers. Who truly killed the Archduke? Was it Princip's hand alone? Or was it the Black Hand, the Serbian state, perhaps even Europe itself, hungry for war? To find the answer, we must look beyond Sarajevo, to the chancelleries of St. Petersburg, Berlin, and Vienna. For behind the young assassin stood not only his comrades, but entire nations, watching, waiting, and perhaps even guiding his hand. International conspiracies? Opening visuals. Montage of European capitals in 1914. Vienna's grand palaces, St. Petersburg's snowy boulevards, Berlin's military parades, Paris bustling with life. Then, fade to maps showing thick webs of alliances. Narrator, steady, investigative. The death of Franz Ferdinand did not happen in isolation. Behind the pistol in Sarajevo stood the ambitions, fears, and rivalries of entire empires. Some argue the Archduke was not just the victim of a nationalist boy, but of an international conspiracy. The patron of Serbia. To Serbia, Russia was the great protector, the Slavic brother, the empire that promised to shield it from Austrian revenge. Did Russian intelligence encourage the plot? Some whisper that Moscow knew of the danger, but chose silence, hoping a spark in the Balkans would weaken Austria-Hungary. Russian generals in ornate uniforms, telegrams being sealed with wax. No direct evidence has ever emerged. Yet Russia's secret police maintained deep ties to Serbian nationalist networks. To them, an Austria without Franz Ferdinand, a reformer who sought compromise with Slavs, was preferable to one led by hawks who would press for war. Was Russia quietly glad the Archduke was gone? Austria-Hungary, a convenient excuse? Suspicious tone. Others argue that Austria itself allowed the crime to happen. Intelligence reports before June 28 warned of plots in Sarajevo. Officials knew the risks. Yet the Archduke was sent in an open car, with minimal protection, on a date loaded with symbolism. Did Vienna underestimate the threat, or deliberately allow danger to unfold? A map of the motorcade route, highlighted in red. Austrian officers smoking in uniform. For hawks in Vienna, the Archduke's death was not only a tragedy, it was an opportunity. They despised his plans for compromise with Slavs, seeing him as too soft. His assassination gave them exactly what they needed, a pretext to crush Serbia once and for all. Germany, the blank check. And then there was Germany. Kaiser Wilhelm II watched from Berlin as his ally Austria weighed its response. When Vienna hesitated, Berlin offered support, a blank check of military backing. But some whisper the Germans knew of the plot even before it happened. Did Berlin quietly hope that a Balkan crisis would spiral into war, a war it believed Germany could win? Kaiser Wilhelm reviewing troops, German generals leaning over maps. Low probing. If true, then Sarajevo was no accident of fate. It was a trigger, pulled by Princip, yes, but primed by Europe's great powers. The web of alliances. By 1914, Europe was bound in a deadly knot of alliances. Austria was tied to Germany, Serbia to Russia, France to Russia, Britain to France. One spark in the Balkans could set the entire continent ablaze. And Sarajevo provided that spark. Animated dominoes falling, each marked with a flag. Serbia, Austria, Russia, Germany, France, Britain. Was the Archduke doomed, not because of Princip, but because Europe itself was primed for war? A system so unstable that any act of violence, however small, would topple the peace. Theories and shadows. Historians still debate. Some see a lone assassin, driven by nationalist zeal. Others see the long arm of Serbia's Black Hand, guided by rogue officers. And some see something larger still. Russia's quiet encouragement, Austria's negligence, Germany's eagerness. A conspiracy not of individuals, but of nations. Split screen of Princip, Apis, Kaiser Wilhelm, and Tsar Nicholas II, fading one by one into darkness. The truth may never be known. But one fact is certain. In Sarajevo, a single shot tore through more than flesh and bone. It ripped apart the fragile balance of Europe and unleashed a war that would consume millions. The trial. Opening visuals. Black and white photographs of Sarajevo courtroom. Heavy wooden benches. Soldiers with rifles at the ready. A pale, thin young man led in chains. Measured, solemn. The shots had been fired. The Archduke and his wife lay in their graves. Europe trembled on the edge of war. But first, there had to be justice. The men who had carried out the assassination now faced the judgment of the court and of history. The accused, 25 young men and women, were arrested in connection with the plot. Among them, Nedeljko Kabranovic, who had thrown the bomb, Trifko Grabez, a conspirator from Belgrade, and of course, Gavrilo Princip, the frail, 19-year-old student who fired the fatal shots. Archival mugshots of the accused. They were tried in Sarajevo under Austrian law, accused of treason, murder, and conspiracy. Yet one detail would shape their fate more than any confession or piece of evidence: their age. Princip's youth. Grave. At the time of the assassination, Princip was just 19 years old. Under Austro-Hungarian law, the death penalty could only be applied to defendants 20 or older. And so, by a twist of fate, the young man who had plunged Europe into chaos could not be executed. Princip in court, gaunt and defiant. Low steady. Instead, he received the maximum penalty allowed, 20 years in prison. A sentence many believed far too light for the crime of killing an heir to the throne. The trial atmosphere. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. The defendants were defiant, often mocking their captors. Princip himself spoke with conviction, insisting he was no common criminal, but a patriot fighting for freedom. Reenactment. Princip standing, thin but fierce, speaking in a wavering voice. Quoting, "I am a Yugoslav nationalist, and I believe in the union of all South Slavs," he declared. "I regret nothing." After pause, to many in the Balkans, he became a symbol of sacrifice. To Austria, he was nothing but a murderer. Sentences handed down. On October 28, 1914, the verdicts were read. 4 of the older conspirators were sentenced to death by hanging. 16 others received long prison terms. Kabranovic, who had swallowed cyanide that morning in June, received 20 years. Princip, protected by his youth, received the same. Judges reading verdicts, guards leading men away. Somber. As the sentences were passed, the world outside the courtroom was already shifting. Austria had declared war on Serbia. Russia had mobilized. Germany and France had joined. The Great War was beginning. The trial's outcome mattered little compared to the tidal wave of blood about to engulf Europe. Princip in prison. Princip was sent to the fortress prison at their Scienstadt, in today's Czech Republic. The conditions were brutal. Kept in solitary confinement, often shackled, his health, already fragile, deteriorated quickly. Malnourished, weakened by tuberculosis, he wasted away. Dark prison cells, rusted shackles, a frail man coughing into rags. By 1917, his right arm had been amputated due to infection. He weighed barely 90 pounds. Guards noted that he was a shadow of the fiery young man who once spoke defiantly in court. The final days. Soft, mournful. On April 28, 1918, at just 23 years old, Gavrilo Princip died in his cell. Forgotten by many, despised by others, idolized by some. He was buried in a pauper's grave within the prison grounds, his body hidden to prevent it from becoming a nationalist shrine. Prison walls dissolving into a faded photograph of Princip's grave. Pause, then steady. The man who had set fire to the world did not live to see the war's end. He died emaciated, alone, and powerless. And yet his shadow loomed over the trenches, over the millions who fought and died in the war that his bullets had begun. Legacy of the trial. The Sarajevo trial closed with verdicts and sentences, but it opened questions that would never be answered. Was justice truly served? Could punishment ever equal the scale of the catastrophe that followed? Or had these men, by fate or design, been pawns of forces far larger than themselves? Grave, closing tone. In the end, the trial of Gavrilo Princip and his comrades was less about justice and more about symbolism. They were punished, yes, but the world was already at war. The Archduke was gone. Empires were collapsing, and Europe's future was burning in the trenches. Epilogue: a world forever changed. Opening visuals: a silent montage. The empty streets of Sarajevo, barbed wire over trenches, soldiers marching to the front. Then, ruins of cities, refugees on the road, fields of crosses. Somber, reflective. The gunshots in Sarajevo lasted only seconds, but their echoes shook the world for decades. From a quiet Balkan street, the path of history veered into fire and darkness. A single pistol unleashed a war that would kill more than 20 million, topple 4 empires, and reshape the very map of Europe. The domino effect. Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. Russia mobilized in defense. Germany declared war on Russia, then on France. Britain entered to defend Belgium. In weeks, the world was engulfed. The Great War had begun. Animated maps showing alliances pulling nations into war. Measured. Could it all have been avoided? If Franz Ferdinand had not died that day, perhaps compromise might have prevailed. He was known as a reformer, willing to grant more rights to the Slavs of the empire. His death silenced that vision and empowered the Hawks. A world in ruins. When the war ended in 1918, Europe was unrecognizable. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, gone. The Ottoman Empire, gone. The German and Russian empires, shattered. Out of the ashes came new nations, new borders, new resentments. And from those resentments would rise an even greater catastrophe 2 decades later, World War II. Transition from World War I trenches to Hitler's rallies, tanks rolling across Europe. The question that remains. Low, deliberate. And so we return to the question, who really killed the Archduke? Was it Gavrilo Princip, the frail teenager with a pistol and a dream of freedom? Was it the Black Hand, Serbia's secret society, pulling strings from the shadows? Was it the governments of Europe, negligent, complicit, or eager for war? Or was it the system itself, a continent tied by alliances, poisoned by nationalism, destined for conflict? Princip's gaunt face dissolving into images of European leaders, then into trenches filled with soldiers. Reflective, almost whispering. Perhaps the Archduke was not killed by one man, but by an entire world teetering on the edge of destruction. Closing words. Final, solemn. From Sarajevo's cobblestones to the killing fields of Europe, the assassination of Franz Ferdinand remains a turning point, a moment when fate and choice collided. We may never know every secret, every hidden hand, but we know this. On June 28, 1914, history changed forever, and the world has lived in its shadow ever since. Closing visuals. Fade to black and white photo of the Archduke and Sophie. Their faces linger, then dissolve into smoke. The words appear. Who really killed the Archduke?